Hi, everybody in podcast land and also on YouTube. I'm James.
I'm David.
I'm Riley.
And today, the Carpool Critics Movie Podcast discusses why we're wearing masks.
Oh.
Just joking. We're going to be talking about The Truman Show, and it turns out we're wearing masks now. Hopefully, you listeners in podcast land can't really hear a difference. And you people on YouTube, well, let us know if this is even worth watching when you can't see our faces.
I know you want to see our whole faces. We're so beautiful, but
It keeps moving when I'm talking. My nose is out now.
Stop. Yeah, we're doing our best here, but at least the dividers are gone.
Hey.
On the podcast platforms, you won't be able to. You never even knew we had.
Yeah.
We had dividers, but YouTube people, hey, look at this. Look at that beautiful wall.
Regardless of how you listen, just let us know your feedback. Do you want us to wear the mask? Does it suck? Is it worth it? Let us know. Anyway, let's get into this movie.
And before we do, it's a spoiler alert.
Not very on brand.
No, it's not.
Yeah, you should have done the
Jim
good
Carrey
morning,
freak
good
out.
afternoon.
Well, look, hey, sometimes it's got to find a funny thing to do, and other times I just need to yell. You know, sometimes you just need to let it out.
It's true.
David, what do you give this movie out of 10?
Truman Show, huh? Created in a perfect storm, Truman Show is prophetic, visionary, and near perfectly executed. How is this movie not number one on IMDb? No, 9.3.
Wow. Okay, I was scared there for a second. When we were talking before the podcast, I feel like you indicated that you maybe had some spicy things to say.
Yeah, I still do.
Ooh.
It's not a 10.
That 0.7 is a heavy 0.7.
There's some.
All right.
Riley, give it to me.
I could write a slogan, but how would you know that it's not just part of the script for an elaborate TV show designed to chronicle your entire life? You couldn't know that. But what you can know is that The Truman Show is unique, hilarious, and heartwarming. I love this movie. 9 out of 10.
Wow.
What, James?
No. A near perfect portrayal of a concept we've all thought about that ages incredibly well despite containing no preservatives. 8.75 out of 10. That's a
Nice.
damn good movie,
It's
man.
Yeah.
a really good movie.
Okay, so I'm interested. It's so interesting that you guys rated it that because I was really struggling. I slept through my alarms this morning, so I was like rushing to work, trying to come up with a slogan and rating in my head. And I was like, is it like a 8.75? Is it 8? I'm like, I don't know whether I just like it so much because of the nostalgia lens, but I think at the end of the day, I was like, I have to give it a subjective, like this is more of a subjective 9. I appreciate that there's quite a few technical things that like they could have done better, but
yeah,
I just love the movie. It works so well.
It's such a brilliant, simple idea.
Yeah.
And they took it to its end game, and they made every little detail of it work. And I'm
Right.
so excited to talk about it after we talk about our sponsor.
Oh, wow. Nice segue, David. Carpool Critics is supported by Vessi Footwear, famous for making shoes that are light, comfortable, and most importantly, waterproof. They're made from a dual climate knit material, and they're 100% vegan, which is completely badass. F the haters. They've got an... They've just announced their The Weekend shoe, which Riley is holding up to the camera.
Whoa.
That's what it sounds like. Very classy. So head to vessi.com/carpoolcritics to reserve your own or check out their existing lineup and get $25 off using our code. $25 off, guys. I got a pair of their older shoes and they're 100% pretty cool.
Yeah.
Same, yeah, I love them.
Winter's coming. I'm going to be wearing them all the time.
Winter came in a day and it left.
That's right.
Season 8 sucks.
Back to summer.
We're also brought to you by Private Internet Access VPN. PIA helps you hide your true IP address so that you can bypass geo restrictions and censorship. You can connect up to 10 devices at once, and it includes an internet kill switch
I don't know what a Truman Show kill switch
if
sounds like.
your VPN gets disconnected involuntarily. I would have chosen static, TB static.
Oh.
PIA is available for Windows, Mac, Android, iOS, and even has a Chrome extension, so check it out at lmg.gg/carpoolcritics.
No, it should have been voice of God. Truman, turn off the internet.
You can't leave.
You can't leave.
This is Ed Harris.
Ed Harris just like electrocutes him before he can step out the door.
Imagine he just has like a kill switch, a bomb implanted in his neck.
His head explodes on national television.
Oh no.
That would certainly make it more of like a dark comedy than it is.
That's the Japanese version.
Truman Royale.
Yeah.
Man, this movie is awesome. And I think a big part of it, and like even before we get into the actual movie, is how this movie kind of came to be. And so screenwriter was a super paranoid dude, like unhealthily paranoid. And that's why he came up with this script, because he just kind of was imagining that everything was centered around him.
As we all have.
Yeah, and so he brought it to the studio. The director got on board. They got Jim Carrey, but then Jim Carrey was actually busy doing Liar Liar. So they had a whole year with the screenwriter and the director to like refine the screenplay and change it and like really think about the detail. And they both wrote extensive back story documents about the whole world and all the world building.
Oh.
And I think that goes a long way to make this whole concept feel complete and not just like kind of thrown together. There's so many little details in this movie that really make it feel so fully realized, and I think that helps to sell the illusion of the Truman Show.
You know what's a good example of that, I feel? When they barely do a nod about how the whole set is constructed, where they reveal in a montage featurette later in the movie that it's a big dome.
Yep.
Right.
But they don't just say, yeah, the set is in a giant dome. They have this little detail, which I feel comes from having time with it.
Yep.
They describe it as one of only 2 objects that you can see from space.
Yeah,
100%.
man-made objects. Yeah.
Yeah, and like the little things like in one of the shots, Truman's sitting there and there's just a little bottle of vitamin D beside him, but of course he needs to take a vitamin D supplement. There's no sun. And like, or all the bridges that you see are so shoddily constructed because they never plan for anything to go over them. And so you, like, it's such a small detail in passing. And I honestly don't know if that was planned or just bad set design, but all the pillars are just a little bit crooked and wonky.
Oh, I'm sure that's planned.
That's so interesting.
And it's just like little details like that make all the jokes, all the thought-provoking aspects of this movie just land so well.
Hold
on.
I realized we never did the synopsis.
Let's have it now.
Okay. Well, The Truman Show follows Truman Burbank, played by Jim Carrey, the unwitting star of a reality TV show that documents his life 24/7. Truman longs to break the monotony of his life by traveling to Fiji, where an old flame... Truman longs to break the monotony of his life by traveling to Fiji, where an old flame apparently resides, but he's blocked at every turn by the show's creators, who desperately need to keep him within their sphere of idyllic suburban control. Did I say idyllic properly?
I like it.
How do you say it?
Idyllic?
Yeah, idyllic, right? The illusion eventually unravels, with Truman confronting the show's creator, played by Ed Harris, and walking off set into freedom.
Freedom!
Ah, man, we'll get to that later, but...
We'll save the ending for the ending.
Yeah, that was iconic, man.
I think the movie actually gets better as it goes.
Totally.
I would take off my 1.25 for the first third or first half of the film because it's a little... It's tonally, it gets better for me. The first half is kind of slapsticky and weird. Case in point, when the light drops at the beginning of the movie, one of the first indications that the audience sees and that Truman sees that something's off is that this light, a studio light, drops from the sky and lands on the road and breaks.
Yeah.
And the shot when it drops is just a weird camera angle, and there's like a slide whistle, like boo!
Yeah.
And it just seems like I'm watching.
There's a
like,
slide whistle?
Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
well, you're probably listening on laptop speakers.
No, I'm not. Because this was the first movie that we've done for the podcast that I watched on my brand new 65-inch TV.
Oh,
it's HD, and it's like totally understimulating.
Hey, man, it
it's
was
nice TV. I saw it.
It was great.
Yeah.
No. I mean, the movie is 1080p, not 4K.
Yeah.
And I take back everything I said about watching a laptop. I don't. It's not that different.
It's good. I actually had to watch it on a laptop because my TV was occupied by my girlfriend and her friend watching Blade Runner. So.
Oh, this is upside down world.
Blade Runner. Wow.
But anyways, it comes down and it's just like, "Boop," and it breaks, and it's just a little weird. And then it's just kind of like that. I think one of the things that contributes to that is that casting Jim Carrey.
Yeah, it's
on the
interesting.
one hand is perfect, but on the other hand is awful.
Right.
When he's just a normal guy who apparently was just like a random tenacious baby that they chose from a group of 5 babies,
Tenacious baby.
newborns.
That is one tenacious baby.
Well, he was the one that like he arrived first or whatever, right?
Yeah,
He was
yeah.
born on time.
Yeah.
So they choose him as a newborn, right? So you might just get like the most mundane dude, you don't know. But they happen to get Jim Carrey. So in the mundane scenes where he's just like, in case I don't see ya, hey! It's just, he's like kind of larger than life to a degree that's kind of unbelievable.
Yeah.
But then when he's realizing that his world is a lie and he's going mad, then he's a perfect cast for that.
Yeah, it's true. I was like wondering, what if, well, both in the universe and in the movie universe and in our universe, I'm like, what would they have done in the universe, in the movie, if Truman ended up being like a jerk? Like, they're like, oh, hopefully he's good on TV.
Yeah, there's a few things. I think that part of it is that Christoph is shaping Truman, so he's parenting him from afar, shaping him to be the best entertainer he can be. But there's a version of the script where Truman kind of sucks. So the original version, written by Andrew Nichols, or is that Andrew Nichols is the writer, was a much more cynical script.
I also read the script. I read apparently the shooting script.
Okay.
I don't know how many versions there are, but if it says shooting script on it,
There was 14 drafts written in that year, so there was probably more before. So there's lots of
even
versions.
the shooting script that I read was more. Almost everything that's in it is in the movie. Almost. Some of it's moved around, but the beginning in particular, he's more like rebellious and jaded and cynical. He gets there later in the movie, but right from the first, right from the beginning, he's kind of like that. And so I guess they would have anything that they changed for the movie. They must have changed either on set or in editing.
There's a combo. There's definitely a lot of. I think Jim Carrey brings a lot to a movie. Like I don't know which version of the script I read, but they're like the scene when he's talking to the mirror and he's talking about like, if I die, promise me you'll eat me. And like, ew, gross. I think that was improvised because in the script it's talking about the mountain, but it's just like talking about how difficult it is going to be to rise. But there's a characterization that he brings, but there's also stuff in the original script, like he witnesses a sexual assault but fails to step in.
What?
Yeah, there's a scene where he's driving his car and he's at a red light, and then there's a woman on a bench, and he can see these two like thug ruffians harassing her, and he steps out of his car and like stands up and like pays attention, and then they actually end up dragging her into the bushes, and she's yelling and stuff. And he does nothing, and then I think a car comes behind him and honks because it's green, and he gets back in his car and drives away.
Oh my
and then the
gosh.
actors go, oh, physical violence always paralyzed him, and so of course he would act that way.
That would be a much darker movie for sure.
But I think that they didn't put it in because it takes focus away from his other fears. Like in the movie, they just focus on he's afraid of water.
Yeah.
And
we don't want to give him too many. I mean, he probably has quite a few neuroses, or I would expect that somebody does.
Well, they show them later in the movie, and in the script they're in the first 10 pages. But when he's in class and he's like, I want to be an explorer, and the teacher's like, everything's been discovered, idiot.
Yeah.
That's in the movie. They just moved it to a later section where it's like a fake interview with Christoph, the creator of all this. And so it makes sense to have these kind of flashbacks when he's explaining how he got Truman to be the way he is.
Right. The other scene, importantly, there is when he's climbing the rocks and at the beach, and his dad's like, no, don't look over that rock face to the set that we haven't got prepared yet.
Yeah.
That's his first flashback in the movie. In the shooting script.
Oh, okay.
And then the next flashback is his dad dying from the boat.
It's like, you got to know your limitations, Truman.
Yeah, and in the script, it's very particular. Every single flashback must be played on a TV. And it's like,
oh, interesting.
But they didn't do that. In the actual, well, what they do instead is they've got like that kind of vignette effect on the side of the cameras. It looks like an eye or a small.
Well, that's all the hidden camera shots, basically.
Yeah, so they do that with the flashbacks. But the opening shots of the movie, they have Truman when he's talking to the mirror. That's like on a TV, which is weird. I think with the biggest departure from the script actually is that in the script you are discovering that it's a show while Truman discovers it's a show. But in the movie, the opening shots are the creator being like, well, he's describing the show. So the audience is like, okay, it's a TV show.
And I was saying that because I was like, oh man, I feel like it would be a very different movie if we slowly discovered this over the course.
It would be very Matrix-esque, but I like this the way it is because I think you get attached to Truman and you're more like on board with like his journey because you're like, come on, Truman, you can do it. Whereas instead a lot of your energy, your emotional energy would be spent on what's going on.
Yeah, and I think you're right that there is a strength to like having us be with him on his journey from the start. I think if we were like, what the heck's going on, and then only like halfway through we discover that it's a television show, then that journey is just kind of cut in half.
Something I didn't realize till I was doing the research for this rewatch: all those like interview bits weren't shot for the movie. They were shot for like a fake. Like a mockumentary for a behind-the-scenes featurette to go on the DVD.
Weren't.
Yes, they were not part of the script.
What are you talking about?
So they when they were conceptualizing the movie and they were doing all their like prep stuff, they were like, we should make a fake documentary about the Truman Show, and so they filmed all these interviews. They filmed all these interviews with the actors, trying to like be like, this Truman Show is real, and like, oh, when I act for the Truman Show, like I make sure that I'm like engaged all the time or whatever. But then he was like, oh, I like the way that this kind of grounds the Truman Show movie in reality. And so he interspliced all those interview bits to like really make the Truman Show, the movie, feel like a real thing.
Yeah. How did you guys feel about the fact that, so like we know from the get-go that it's a TV show, but then there is still sort of like a half reveal when we first see Christoph and he's like orchestrating the meeting between Jim Carrey and his dad. there's like a things are fleshed out more. I feel like up till that point we understand that Truman is being watched and like he's on a TV show and he's being broadcast, but we don't know the extent of like what the setup is or like how many people are being hired for this type of thing. And so then in that moment,
Yeah, that's when it switches.
We meet Christoph, and then we also get like the flashback, or not flashbacks, but it's like
A montage, featurette.
It's an explanatory montage about how he was like filmed as a baby and all that stuff. But I'm like, that's kind of a weird place to put it, right in the middle there.
Well, I think that's a script writing thing. You reveal your villain's true nature, or like a thing about your villain at the halfway point of the movie, and it changes the stakes.
Well, no, that's fine. But I think the whole thing about like Truman was picked from a baby. Well, I guess he's explaining all that, isn't he?
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense.
I think it works better there than at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because you want to have unanswered questions.
Yeah.
And it's cool that they finally give it to us. And they use that opportunity because that is the moment where we go from inside looking out to outside looking in. Because they show us that sequence where Truman is reunited with his father, right? And we get to see the television producers and the creator orchestrate that moment and get to see him turn the music up here and go to wide shot and go to close up and then so now we're in their world. Okay, so now that we're outside the bubble, let's see some life outside the bubble, and then they air that expository montage. And so I think it totally works out.
No, you're right. I think I was a bit confused though, because I was like, well, this is like a explanatory montage that's usually in the beginning of a movie.
Yeah,
but maybe
I'm glad they did it.
Maybe that's how they fix those things.
I was curious how you guys feel about kind of that moment. This movie, I think, isn't as interested in making you feel as opposed to engaging your mind or your imagination. Where like that moment, he's reuniting with his dad that he hasn't seen for 20 years.
Yeah.
But they're undercutting it because they're showing you the TV side, and they're having the director be like, "Wait for the close up." Zoom in, zoom in,
it's
and
really
then it pops in the close up, and like everyone's like, "Yeah, great, awesome!" And they're undercutting, I think, the emotionalism of that moment for the idea of what's going on. But what do you guys think of that?
I disagree with you, actually. I think they're just giving you a different emotion. Instead of you feeling what Truman is feeling, of like, "Oh my God, I love you, Dad. I'm so sad," you're getting the twisted feeling of like that powerful emotion that he's feeling is artificial.
Yeah.
Totally.
And it's for these people enjoyment, and then your skin is crawling, and it's just a different emotion.
That's totally
it's like
fair.
Horror a little bit. Yeah.
It's great. I love that moment.
I also love how it's meta in terms of like we're watching a movie that is specially crafted in order to make us feel things, and we are watching somebody in that movie specially craft something in order to make people feel things.
The score in that moment is interesting.
Oh, yeah,
because I think it does go with what you're saying, where it's like it's kind of schmaltzy and emotional, but it also has like kind of some weird darker undertone that's not about like this emotional payoff. And like the synth is like and it's interesting. I'd say overall the score does its job. I think it underserves the movie a little bit. I'd say that might be the weakest element of the movie.
Really?
Is the score by Philip Glass.
The one thing that I thought was like definitely one of the most iconic things about this movie was that the scene where he's like, he kind of figures out that like something's going on, and so he decides to break routine. He goes into the revolving door and goes around three times, and then comes back out into the courtyard instead of going into his job. And he kind of like is like looking around like, oh, what if I go and tie my shoe right now? What if I suddenly cross the street?
Yeah.
And the music there is like dun, 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 and it's so like. It's kind of like it's almost like an army kind of like there. I think there is a little bit of like
a snare.
Yeah, and it's just like
I thought the music there was really good.
It's so introspective. Yeah, I love it.
It's really like it's like you can hear his mind expanding.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
It's like a kind of uplifting, liberating.
And it's also a weird. I was trying to time it because before the main theme comes in, I was like, "What time signature is it?" Because it's kind of like it's got some weird rhythms going on. But I was like, "Oh, okay, it's like 6/4 or 6/8 or whatever." But before that comes in, it's like you're trying to figure it out, and it's like, "Oh, this is like a weird time," and I feel like it's kind of disorienting in the same way that you know that Truman is kind of disoriented.
Oh, you're right, and like I think that kind of simple score really works to push an idea, and I think those moments are pushing a very specific idea. And I think like the ending works very well for the score. I just feel like there's moments in the movie where I was distracted by the music a little bit. And it might be just that it's dated and that the instrumentation is a little bit 90s.
Yeah.
To me, it was a hit or miss. There's
Yeah.
moments like the one you're describing, and later on when it gets intense and he's at sea and stuff.
Great.
The music for those moments was great. The music for the mundane moments in his house was kind of too whimsical and like poppy. I didn't really like that.
Man, I don't
stuff.
even remember that music at all.
There you go.
That's interesting.
I kind of want to go back a little bit to how you were talking about you don't like the tone of the first half. I think they made a choice because they were very much going for like a 1940s white suburban area.
I guess we're seeing the tone that the audience is seeing.
Totally.
Of this show.
And I think it works for that. Like the goofy moments where it's like his butt in the foreground and he's like turning back and it's like, you missed the spot, Truman.
Yeah.
And all those stuff. It's very like 40s sitcom-y. And to me, it works to set up the more like grounded 90s feeling ending.
Right.
But
maybe the
gritty
tone,
dark 90s.
Maybe the tone is intentionally inconsistent because the tone itself is morphing as the reality changes from show to this is the real world.
Yeah.
And we get it kind of taken along.
he gets unplugged from the Matrix.
It really
does.
is. It's like a
crazy.
predecessor to the. It's like a prequel to the Matrix
Totally, yeah.
because he's a prisoner, right?
Yep.
Oh, totally.
And Sylvia calls him as much, but it's like you've heard arguments for people who come from authoritarian countries who might say, you know, as long as that government does a good job, what's the problem? You know, you might call it Orwellian, but like, hey, if they're doing a great job and the people like them, what's the big deal of not having freedom? And that's exactly the world he lives in. He's a prisoner, but he's in this suburban, you know, like beautiful, idyllic world where he has no problems. And why would you want to leave? But the point is that he should have the option to leave.
Right.
And in the Matrix, they talk about how previous Matrixes being too perfect. And it's like, okay, Truman, he knows that stuff is going wrong. There's, as the Matrix says, there's a splinter in his mind where it's not real, right? So it's like, is the problem then, to speak to those proponents of authoritarianism, is the problem that his prison isn't real enough? And it's like, if you just made a better prison, then you could land where it's like, yeah, you're a slave, but it's fine. And that's kind of what the Matrix is. It's a more convincing world than even Sea Haven. Right. They made an even better prison.
I think that the movie isn't really interested in exploring that. I think it's more interested in proposing that the human spirit demands freedom.
Right.
And that the human spirit is curious and needs to feel liberation to do what it wants to do. And that's like I think that's a value that Hollywood really pushes, is like you're free, like your freedom.
For sure.
Your individuality.
You're right.
I think that Christoph kind of like exemplifies the things that you were talking about, because he clearly says explicitly to Truman that like there's nothing out there that's better than what you're going to find in here. Like it's all the same, like the same lies. Like the only difference is that in here you're safe. So I think that it really is.
And they're trying to make a particular type of world that the creator thinks is better. It's clean, it's white. There's literally one black family, and they're written in the script. When he waves to his neighbors, it says an African American family.
Oh my gosh.
And he's wearing a business suit and he's got his white people voice on, right?
Yeah.
And everyone else in the town's white.
There's a bus driver.
That's true.
Bus driver.
That's
black,
true.
But yeah.
And it's Protestant, right? There's there's two instances where they talk about religion. It's when the interview with his wife where she's like, living in Sea Haven, it's a blessed life.
Oh yeah,
you know. And then later on, when they're looking at the sun, Marlon's looking at the sunset, and he's like, that's the big guy upstairs.
That's the big guy.
Quite a paintbrush he's got.
Heck of a paintbrush. I thought that Truman was gonna say something there, like I don't know, something cynical or whatever. But I guess he's
the only parts of the movie at all that might argue, and I feel like this is almost it's not in the movie, and it should be, is suggestions that we're all under some kind of control. We're all being manipulated by the media. They don't really do that. Like you're saying, that the movie's not really interested in doing that. I agree with you there, but there is a glimpse of it when you're in Sylvia's apartment, because she has all this activist memorabilia on the wall.
Yeah.
She has a poster that says like, "Free Truman, who's next? Our children?"
They're gonna have individual TV shows for every one of our children.
In the backstory that was written, the backstory document, there is other shows, and so there's a bunch of copycats. Like there's
no way.
I think it's called like Me Ling My Life. It's like a Taiwanese show that's like a knockoff, and it didn't last very long. And like there's dozens, because like it's the biggest sensation. It's $1 billion TV show.
Yeah.
And so everyone's trying to recreate it, but no one could capture the Truman Show because he's
Right.
so special.
I like the idea that it's like a truly global phenomenon. I like when they're like cutting to all the different people in different places, like looking at it.
I love when movies do that.
Yeah.
They do that in Unstoppable as well. I love when there's just all these different parties in different locations you cut back to, they're all invested.
Yeah.
And it really makes, it has a purpose in a movie functionally where when we cut back to this like crowd in a bar who are all waiting with bated breath looking at the screen. They're feeling the tension. We see them do that, we mirror it.
Totally.
Yeah.
When we see them go, yes!
Yeah.
We mirror it. So it's really effective and evocative, getting the emotional payoffs that you want.
I have the weirdest bit of trivia that I found in my backstory document that makes I have no idea what that was written in, but the dude in the bath, that's Napoleon from the original Bill and Ted. I don't know if you guys have seen that. Anyways, in the document, it's written in the final moments of the Truman Show, he got so excited that his TV dropped into the bathtub and killed him.
No!
Why did
Wait.
Why did they write that?
Oh, that's in the movie.
Yeah, well, but they don't show it. But in the document of like, these are the people in the story. He's dead at the end of the Truman
there is a
Show.
much darker version of this movie that could have existed.
Totally.
That's wild.
Well, it's funny in the thing. There's the Peter Weir version of the document, and then there's the Andrew Nichols version of the document.
Peter Weir being the director.
Peter Weir being the director, and he did like Dead Poets Society, and Andrew Nichols,
Master and Commander.
Yeah.
So Andrew Nichols wanted it to be a bit darker.
In the Peter Weir version, he talks about how Christoph remains young by having blood transfusions, and there's like a few other details.
Got
But
a blood boy.
But in the other one, he's like
that he gets from the other babies that they didn't use.
They're just
God.
wow, that's real dark. He's like, the blood transfusion and all these other things, those are just rumors. And they started having like competing ideas of what the backstory was.
See, now this is interesting. I'm really glad that Peter Weir, undark humored this movie a little bit because I was confused because when I was looking it up before we recorded, it was like, oh, this is a comedy, black comedies, Jim Carrey movies. Like one of the categories was like black comedy, and I was like, oh, it doesn't really. I don't remember it being that dark, But
No.
But this makes a lot more sense now. But I'm glad that it's not as much of dark humor because I think that if this was another, Larry the Cable Guy or something,
Gosh.
I would be like, wait,
Yeah.
No, you mean
guy.
the cable
the
guy.
cable guy, just the cable guy. I'm
Jim
glad
Carrey,
I
I'm Jim
corrected
Carrey.
myself on that. That would have been embarrassing. If this was another like the cable guy, I feel like it would not have been as iconic and memorable.
No, definitely not.
Like not as many people talk about the cable guy being like, oh, that's a good movie.
Yeah, it's kind of like a few people love it.
There's like a couple good memes that I still do. That Star Trek thing.
Yeah, no, it's a funny
You don't
movie.
remember what I'm talking
No.
about? They go to medieval times and they battle. And then he does like, he's pretending that he's doing that like Klingon fight from Star Trek.
Oh, I see.
Where they've got like the Klingon weapon.
Yeah.
And he's like going up in his face with it.
It's a funny movie, but it doesn't hit you on that same sort of like
No.
emotional.
Because it's darker,
Yeah.
you're saying?
No, because
Because
this
less
is
dark.
The cable guy is darker, and because of that, I think you are more horrified the whole time that this guy is like clearly off his rocker. And so in this one, I feel like you have a bit more of an emotional. You're able to kind of like root for the characters a bit more.
Definitely, because there's no menace.
Yeah.
I think
Well, there is menace, but that's the funny thing is that the menace is external. Like it is horrifying, as you say, when we're hearing. When we see that scene of him reuniting with his dad and we see kind of behind the scenes a little bit, it is horrifying. We're like, oh my gosh, we are seeing in excruciating detail just how orchestrated every single...
Yeah, but
and
the
thing for
menace,
me-
the worst case of the menace is that he just has a boring life. Whereas
it's not that
the cable guy, the menace is like, is this guy gonna like...
It's not that he has a boring life, it's that none of it is real in any way. He hasn't experienced life at all. Yeah, the horrifying part for me in that scene was Christoph feeding Marlon the lines.
Yeah.
As Marlon is making the case to Truman that he's like, "Hey, we're best friends, man. We've known
tearing
each other.
up.
We've known each other since we were 7."
Yeah.
And Marlon is
He's
doing
tearing
such
up.
a good
Yeah,
job
yeah.
as an actor and you can see Truman being like, "You're right, man. You're so right." And like I don't understand. In that moment, I was like, how could Marlon live with himself? Like,
Totally.
None of this is, I'm sure that there's some ad-libbing going on in his performance, but like in that moment, none of it is genuine.
Yeah.
It's all coming from Christoph.
And what's the incentive for that actor? Because it's like, he's obviously making a ton of money, but he lives in Sea Haven. Like, when does he get to go home and spend his money?
In the backstory document, he's one of the richest people on the planet. His candy bar is the third most popular candy bar on the planet because anything he promotes is huge. He's like top 3 stars on the entire planet because he's the main character or one of the main characters on the big show, and so it's
I was wondering
it's well
about
worth
that.
it for him. And he
but when does he get to enjoy
assume
that?
that-
they have time. They have like rotating times off where they get to like have a couple weeks.
I guess
or
he
whatever.
did say that there was a time where he was like doing some work with chickens in some other place. Remember,
Yeah.
Truman's like, "Where did you travel to?" And he's like, "Oh, I was all over." So
Yeah.
he could have like taken 6 months off. Or
Yeah,
something.
there's like interesting stuff. Like his mom has had terminal illnesses like 19 times because he kept wanting to travel, and so she would
Yeah.
get down with a major illness, and he'd have
Oh
to
my
come back and
gosh.
stuff. I love that this is a more optimistic movie because it means that like anyone can watch this. Like that's
Yeah.
why I wrote that in my slogan. This should be the #1 movie on IMDb because like who doesn't like the Truman
See,
Show?
but this is the thing, is that I think watching it this time, I acknowledged that, like what you were saying earlier, James, where, I mean, we're going back to that scene with the dad, the reuniting of the dad and son. I think that serves to undercut any real emotion that we might actually feel about Truman. I think that even when he's like in the boat trying to like finally escape, I'm still kind of watching it as like we're not just watching Truman on this journey, right? Which would be more emotional. We would be more invested in his emotional journey if we were like more connected to him that way. But we're watching him through Christoph orchestrating stuff, and then also through the fact that like it's a TV show and then other people are watching it too, and we're watching the people watching him.
Yeah, I'd say that we're not getting the grape juice of that emotion. We're not just squeezing it, but we're kind of getting like a wine version of it where it's
Yeah.
been fermented and changed. And I think that it makes it more complex. And I want to talk
It
about
does make it more complex.
I want
but-
to talk about that ending because I think it might be my favorite ending of any movie ever.
It's really, really good.
It's
It's
great.
so
Solid.
powerful.
The moment where he's, how early you want to start? He's on the boat. Okay, first of all, his character arc is kind of ending when he's sailing himself. Right, he's on the water. He's taking the final step. Like he's basically crashing through all the barriers they've created for him, all this manufactured fear of the water, and sailing himself to the edge of the earth. Flat earthers. Yeah, he's doing it.
Yeah.
He's doing it.
Such a great shot when the boat just like hits the
the
edge,
Oh,
pierces through the wall.
That's like the best part of the movie.
Yeah.
I think I would describe the visual, the wide shot of the water with the big dome and the sailboat just in the little corner, and he starts walking away as a perfect shot.
yeah,
It is
yeah.
like there's nothing wrong. They couldn't make that shot better. It's so powerful.
fantastic. He's
So you're
like
talking about
walking-
like he's already the boat has crashed into the bounds of the set,
Yeah.
into the wall. He steps off the boat and there's a little tiny
So
ledge.
yeah, just
that
an
he-
extreme
curve.
wide, and he's probably like an inch tall on the screen.
Yeah.
And it's just such an incredible visual. Like it's so surreal. Like
Yeah.
crashing into the end of the world. Like when he's slamming into it, crying,
Yeah.
and they even commit to the extra layer of processing emotion by having him have his breakdown from behind. I think another movie would have a
Yes.
close up on him breaking down, slamming into the wall, but this movie commits to you're an external viewer watching Truman. But this is the moment that you don't get to see him
Yeah.
because he's breaking through. He's having his like, I'm becoming free from this TV show moment because you see it from behind for the first time.
Oh, you're
Really-
saying that's kind of more like a first-person view thing. So
No.
No.
It's more that you don't get to see his reaction
Yeah.
because he's breaking free from the show.
that whole shot
Oh,
where
I
he's
get
breaking
it.
against the wall.
I think that's one of the best
yeah.
parts. You see it all through the perspective of just his hand. And at first, it's like a 2001 Space Odyssey thing where the monkeys touch the monolith and they're like trepidation.
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah.
should I touch it? And then his hand rests on it, and that is when it's like clicking for him. Like his whole life is gaslighting.
Yeah.
And this, when his hand
Absolutely.
makes contact with that wall, it's like validation.
Right.
And then you see him go through every
'cause
emotion.
Up to that point, he wasn't 100% sure.
No, that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
His entire life is gaslighting.
Yeah.
And then when his hand makes contact with it and he gets that validation, he then proceeds to go through every emotion known to man. But we only see the hand. He gropes the wall. He pounds on the wall.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I made a note of that shot as well, that like we don't see his face. There's one point in that shot where he kind of like turns to the left and we kind of see the emotion on his face. But for the rest of it, that's one unbroken shot.
Yeah.
It goes on for a long time and we don't see his face.
It
It's
was-
like such an interesting creative
I bet they
decision.
shot it. I'll bet they had
Yeah,
the
I could
coverage
see
of
that.
it.
Probably,
Oh,
because you
probably.
would want to get it. It would be
Oh,
so
for
easy to
sure.
get.
Yeah.
But I think it's a strong choice that I think, it goes to making the emotion of this movie feel like wine instead of grape juice.
Right. No,
And it's awesome.
But see, this is the funny thing. I think even in that moment, I was watching it and I'm like recognizing, I'm like, oh, this is great. That's a great shot. I'm loving this journey, but I wasn't like emotional myself. And I think maybe that's because I've seen the movie. Like I think I didn't know how many times I've seen this movie, but watching it this time, I was like, oh, I might have seen this movie like 6 or 7 times or something.
Riley, how could you?
Which is a lot for me. But like I think I watched it a lot as a kid. But anyways, maybe it's because of that. But I almost feel like the fact that I wasn't super emotional is also because of that kind of distance that I was describing earlier. That like it makes the whole setup a lot more interesting. It makes it more like intellectually stimulating, where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about all the different things that this would mean, the technical aspects of it, and the levels of morality and all that stuff, and. So I think that really keeps you away because it's more intellectual.
Totally. I think I would describe this movie as engaging my imagination more than my heart.
Right.
And that's fine. And that's why it's not a 10 out of 10.
I don't think it's bad.
If I was crying at the end of this movie, it would be like a 10 out of 10.
How did you feel during the sailing scene when Kristoff is telling them ramp up the waves?
I felt anger,
Sad,
sadness.
And then I love how it's on TV. Like there's an earlier line where they're like, "Are you going to do X on live TV?" So you know that they have a line. And then when Truman's on the boat and he's like, "Kill me! You're gonna have to kill me!" That was so awesome. And you're like, "That's on TV." The whole world got to see that, and that's kind of sick.
But you know what's
Oh no, I was just gonna.
And I don't mean sick as in sweet. I mean it's kind of sick.
I found that whole
like
sequence
that the world has to see that in the world. It's he's holding a mirror up to every audience member, right?
I'm glad you clarified that.
Yeah.
There's a million ways they could have shot that storm sequence, but the way they did it is so effective at like making you feel like he's really going under, the boat's flipping, and I really felt it this time. And did you guys know Jim Carrey almost drowned during that filming of that sequence?
Wow, I believe it.
Because it's in a tank. And they're shooting jet engines at him to get all the storm and all the water.
Gosh.
And at one point, he did the signal that I can't breathe anymore, and they're supposed to save him, but they thought it was just part of his acting. He went under and disappeared, and the divers couldn't find him.
Whoa, what?
But he had made it to the back of the tank, and he was able to like grab the wall and hold on and like. Oh
my god!
But like the divers were like, "Where did he go?"
This tank?
It's pretty big because you're filming.
There's a full boat in there.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
And you totally believe that Kristoff was gonna kill him because they say like, are you gonna kill him? And he's like, well, he was born on TV. Why can't he die on TV?
Yeah, it's.
I think that. What do you guys think of the fact that Kristoff tried to get him to stay? Like, I think that really worked on a thematic level because Kristoff really is this sort of like abusive, possessive
God
parent.
complex.
Yeah, God complex as well, where he's just like, I know what's best for you. You don't know anything. Trust me. Like, there's nothing out there for you. Stay here. There's so many abusive parents and guardian figures that have done that to characters, and it really works on that level. But on another level, I'm like, what is he? Truman can't come back now. He knows it's a show. What are you gonna do? Like, okay, Truman, you pretend too.
Yeah,
well, the creator's kind of up against his own dilemma and his own morality there, because earlier he says, I believe it's when Sylvia calls in, he says, hey, if Truman really wanted to leave, he could leave. And then he actually has to stand by that later on. When Truman is really, really, really trying to leave. Mm-hmm. And he goes, well, how bad do I want him to stay? Yeah. How bad do I need to have the first televised consummation to happen? Because there's a deleted scene where there's
you sent us this.
A panel, all the actors are in the back room, and the creator is giving them a briefing. Okay, here's what's going to happen. The wife, she's off the show. She doesn't want to be here anymore. We got this new cutie who's going to take over as a love interest.
Right.
And this is critical. Your role is critical because when you have that baby, we're passing the torch. Now we're going to have 2 Truman shows. There's going to be a show for Truman and a show for the baby. That's the next generation, the next 30 years of television. It's all of our paychecks.
Yeah.
All these things are at play.
See, that's interesting.
Just what stood out to me in that scene is Marlon being like, so what happens when Truman dies? With zero heart, zero passion. And I wish...
Does it go back to one show?
That's to go back to one show. And he's just... It made me a little bit sad. And I think maybe that would have engaged our hearts a bit more if someone on the show cared about Truman a little bit more. Because Marlon has grown up with him since he was a child for 29 years. And he just doesn't give a fuck about Truman.
That's
it made me sad.
Such a cynical take that like these people who are super involved in his life wouldn't actually. And the thing that made that even darker for me was the fact that he said, so what happens when Truman dies? Do we go back to one show? Indicating that he'd still be around when Truman dies.
Yeah, you'd be God.
Why do you think they cut that scene? Was it too dark?
I think it's too dark.
Too dark. It's also not that funny. It doesn't really add that much. It's kind of weird and creepy. I think it turns Ed Harris' character too dark.
Well, but he's pretty dark.
Yeah, but
You got to be kind of screwed up to.
I think Ed Harris brings a warmth to the role because it was supposed to be Dennis Hopper, and they filmed a bunch of days with Dennis Hopper, but he just didn't know his lines, so they fired him.
Well, they have this scene I was going to ask you about, and it's the scene where I believe it's after the creator has just really done some harm to Truman, but there's a shot. It's after Truman has like kind of broken through and had that montage that Riley was talking about, where he's like testing the limits of the world and trying to run into buildings, and he sees behind the curtain a little bit. And
he smacks an electrician's butt and nothing happens. It's so great.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. But
when he comes out of the elevator building, he's like, okay, I got kicked out of there. And his last kind of act of defiance before he runs away is to he smacks the electrician's butt with his briefcase and then runs away. The electrician doesn't respond at all. It's so funny.
But he takes his wife on this journey where they're leaving town, right?
Yeah.
Oh, how convenient and synchronized. We're blocked at every turn. And then he goes and they're finally blocked by this nuclear disaster.
Right.
And all these people in hazmat suits like take him down.
Yeah.
I believe it's after that Christoph is watching the night cam of Truman sleeping. And he's petting the camera on Truman's nose. And I was like, what is this shot trying to tell us? And I think it's going back to what you're saying, where he's not completely evil. He loves Truman in a way. He feels like he is Truman's creator or father in a way.
Yeah.
But that doesn't. You're implying that people who are evil or who do evil things can't love.
No, I'm saying he's doing both.
Yeah,
and that's the shot that tells us that.
Right. He's a complex character for sure. But I think that I think that the idea of doing this to somebody and that's completely messed up. I mean, but absolutely, I completely agree with you that he has this sort of like father relationship. He feels that they say specifically that Truman was he was the first baby to be adopted by a corporation.
It made my skin crawl.
Oh yeah, that's gross.
It's like, ugh.
He also says
but corporations are people, so
they're entities. They specifically say that multiple times, you were real. You know, Truman, you're real. Your emotions are real. Yeah. His name is Truman.
Yeah. I know.
Right?
I love that.
Thank you. I was waiting for when that would come out.
But to what extent is that true? Because clearly they're going to kind of curate this world. He is a reflection of what they give him. He's a product of the environment they create for him.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And they don't really explicitly tell us this, but when he meets his mom, the first scene with his mother, they're in her living room above the mantle. There's a portrait of his mother in his mother's living room. She has a portrait of herself. She has her own damn face painted in her living room.
That's weird.
And I was like, did they? She's kind of like an overbearing, kind of crazy mom.
Yeah.
And like, do you think that if you're the one running this show, you probably would do this? Would you make characters like, oh, we got to give him an insane mom? We have to throw in drama to make his life more interesting to watch.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think that he is the true man in the truest sense that you could capture on film, because like reality TV is people know there's cameras there, so they present a false version of themselves. So even though he's curated by Christoph, he lives as authentically as he can, and that's as authentic as a camera could ever capture a person.
I guess so. I mean, you could have hidden cameras and not actors.
So
you could have
more backstory built into this backstory document.
Trivia bot strikes again.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. I just find it so interesting.
Pull the lever.
Pull the lever. Kronk. The Christoph's previous work before this was he worked with a guy whose uncle owned an inner city building, and so they wired it up with a bunch of like cameras, basically like a Truman Show, but inside this building. And then they opened it up to like inner city kids, and so they had this like 24-hour surveillance documentary of inner city life, and they captured like all the drugs, all the sex, all of this. And that might be more authentic, but it also would have been a really weird movie.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they tell him that like you were real, but I don't think. I think I don't know which one of you was saying that, but I don't think he was real. I think that's messed up. It's like he's a construct.
For sure, but I guess he, as a human, is like the purest form of actor a person could be, because you're right, he's not a human, he's a created product.
Yeah, he's like you said, he's the closest you could get while still creating something. But he's a human in the sense that like inputs and outputs, right? Like they control the inputs, and then the outputs that he reflects back are human reactions.
No, for sure, for sure.
Can we talk about Sylvia though?
Yes, please.
Like that's the most interesting part of this movie is Sylvia.
I every time I watch this movie, I always hate that he starts out unfaithful to his wife. I wish they set it up. They set it up pretty early that why he cares about Sylvia, and it's not just love. It's also she has a lot of answers. But it always makes me like him a little bit less. That like right off the bat, he's just like,
well,
what's
fair.
Unfaithful in what sense? The fact that he has like this picture that he's trying to create,
building this picture of this woman, and it's like it's kind of like it's hard. You need a visual thing in the film. It's better than him in like writing in a journal or something. Sylvia, whatever.
Oh, okay, wait.
But it's also like kind of weird and serial killer-y that he has this like cutout assemblage. Yeah.
Do you think that? Are you saying that like when we first meet him, we see him doing that, and we don't really know the broader context? So then we're like, oh my gosh, he cheats on his wife?
Yeah, and he just like his mind is not engaged in his marriage, and like by the end of the movie, you get the context that she's not engaged in this marriage; it's just a job.
Well, it's also fair too because we see at the college flashback that he actually is interested in Sylvia before.
Yeah.
What's his wife's name? Meryl, played by Laura Linney, who is just so perfectly cast as a woman on the brink. She's an Ozark, and she's always just trying to hold it together.
Yeah,
on the brink, but also the perfect like 50s Mount Nicaragua. No, blah blah blah.
Yeah. Anyway, so she comes into the picture when he's already staring at or admiring Lauren from afar.
Yeah,
Lauren / Sylvia.
I love that.
I think that his distractions there, I guess, being focused on another woman other than his wife, I think is completely. I think that. I guess you don't know right away that everything's constructed, but like later you find out that he was basically forced into this whole storyline.
Totally.
Like it feels kind of like an arranged marriage sort of thing.
And
where I don't blame him for not being fully devoted to his wife when he probably was never fully devoted to his wife from the beginning, and he only married her because that was like the path that was like so forced upon him.
Everybody in our universe already feels like that, where you can be 30 or 40 and be like, am I with the person I'm supposed to? Do I have the job I'm supposed to have?
Right.
Like I'm supposed to follow this path that society says you're supposed to follow, and here's all the reasons why it's a good choice for me to be on this path.
Right.
But for him, it's just like 10x, and he has. You can bet that Marlon and his mother were like, that Meryl, she's a nice girl.
Yeah.
You probably can't do better than her.
No, exactly.
And so he just feels this to the extreme.
Well, and I imagine the pressure like people feel from parents and friends or whatever to like do certain things like that.
But if the whole world was pressuring
if there was literally no other alternative, because there's even like we don't know how hard he pushed back against this idea, but like from what we see of his tenacity later, we're like, oh, okay, well maybe he did push back a lot, and the showrunners just made it absolutely not possible in any other outcome.
But no, it can't be that, because we know that Sylvia exists. We know that Lauren is cast in the show. They've put her in the show. They've placed her in the park with an eye shot of him. So it might be the case that there are several characters who are all in the running for his affections, and maybe the actor playing Meryl is just the most industrious and wants to be that top woman. She wants to be the richest actor on the planet.
No.
So activated trivia bot.
She falls on him.
Wait, David has trivia.
I have the answer. I have trivia.
That's not what happened.
She was supposed to be just an extra, and they didn't do it. Sylvia was supposed to be just an extra.
Okay, not Meryl.
They didn't vet her properly, and the only reason Christoph let it go so long was he thought it might be interesting.
Right.
And he would later admit in later interviews that it was a huge mistake and he should have stopped it right away.
Right.
Because that addresses
got Fiji into his mind.
Yeah.
The main question I had with Sylvia was when they're in the library and Marlon's there and Meryl's there and they're studying, and Marlon and Meryl are like, hey, let's go away and go have drinks. Are they trying to take them away because they know Sylvia's already sitting there and she's trouble? Because they try to convince Truman to leave, but he says, I really going to study, I'm going to stay. And that kind of is cool because it shows us the boundaries of the realism of the show, where it's like they can try to force whatever they want, but he's a human with his own agency, and at some point they couldn't be like, come with us right now, because it would break the illusion.
Well, I
don't know.
Christoph is invested in the illusion, and so he wouldn't want that. He doesn't want like security guards to come in and drag him.
So
he wants the authentic.
If he's going to be like, no guys, I'm staying, go away. At some point, they have to, right?
I think that if they really wanted him to leave, what I think happened.
Well, yeah, the librarian could be like, guys, there's a smoke alarm. There's carbon monoxide in the building. Leave now.
Or they could like have something that's like really enticing to him that he really wants more than studying or whatever. But I think that part of his character is this kind of like nerdy, like easygoing. He cares about doing a good job or whatever. So then they would write it in a way where they will have the actors kind of be like, hey, come on, like kind of try to get him to go, but not try too hard. So that because they know that he's going to be like, no, guys, I got to study.
Well, Christoph knows that the appeal of the show is his authentic reaction. Yeah. He's human. He's real. Christoph knows that, so he's going to write in, try to take him away. It's better if we can take him away. But if he pushes back, that's the show.
I don't know if the appeal is as much his authentic reaction as it is that they have crafted this character who's fun to watch. I think we were having this conversation earlier about like how he's the true man, like it's authentic human reaction, but because everything is so heavily orchestrated, like okay, we get some real human reactions within scenes where it's like, okay, he goes to reunite with his dad or whatever, and then he hugs his dad, and Christoph doesn't make him say dad, in the hug, and that's the moment where it's like, oh, he said dad, that's the good moment. He didn't make him say that. That was a real human moment, but beyond those like little tiny things, I think that's the only sphere in which he can have these sort of real reactions that you're talking about. But on a broad sense, making a decision to like study or not study, that's all orchestrated. That's not Truman making that decision to study and so he studies. That's the show allowing him to.
They are ultimately allowing him, but I'm saying it's give and take. Like they tried to make him not, and then he put up his boundary.
No, I don't think so.
And then they didn't press harder. Okay, well, anyway, we're getting sidetracked because what I really want to talk about
I want to talk a long time about this.
When they leave, Sylvia's there.
Yeah.
And the show is allowing her to be there.
No.
And they're allowing her to be there. The librarian would have taken her away.
Right.
So she's there. But we also know that she's not too purposefully there because when he starts to talk to her and he's like, oh, Lauren, she's like looks down at her book where her name is written.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, Lauren, I'm Lauren. So she's not like she's an extra.
And he's like konnichiwa, and she's like, what?
Like you're studying Japanese. Oh yeah. Like so she's not committed to the role.
I think in the backstory it says that she wasn't properly debriefed or properly trained, and so that Christoph was like mad about that. But I could see in that moment Christoph. He's all about like he's the artist. He's the ultimate artist. I want the authentic, and he saw that Truman showed interest in Sylvia, and so he might be like putting that out there to see what he gets, and he's not expecting her to go full truther on him and be like, it's all a lie. He's expecting like maybe he'll fall in love, and we can kind of craft the narrative around that.
I guess if there's any misstep, it's that once he identified the interest, he did not take her aside and brief her.
Yeah,
he should have.
I think that's what I'm saying is that it seems to me more like she wasn't part of the plan explicitly. Like I think that. The first shot where the first time we see her where they're in the park and they're making eye contact and then Meryl falls onto Truman and then she's gone, assuming that like something happened. They shuffled her away. They're at the dance and that exact same thing happens. She gets shuffled away, and so both of those instances indicate to me that she was an extra, and they know that like she's kind of like trying to overstep her bounds. So then they're like, okay, first warning, second warning, and then. She was on the other side of his desk in the library, not because that was orchestrated by the show, but because she kind of wiggled her way in there and like found her way there. And then
but they still know she's there, and they could take her away. So they got to be allowing it to happen.
I don't know. I think that I can imagine that there's a certain amount of wiggle room for like extras to kind of like be like, oh, I'm going to sit at this desk instead of this desk.
But she's on their radar already. So I believe that they're letting something happen.
Maybe they don't see how much of a big deal.
Yeah.
This must be a normal thing, right? For him to be like, oh, what's that?
Pretty girl.
They shuffle it over. They're not like, oh my gosh, we have to make sure we watch this person because he like looked at her.
She's clearly there as an activist. I believe that the pin she has that says "How does it end?"
Yeah.
I think that's an activist pin. I think it's from the world meta. Outside of the Truman Show, people in the world have these pins that say, "How does it end? Are they gonna kill him?" It's an activist pin. And then so anyway, she says we need to hang out like right now.
Yeah.
And they run off, and they run out so far that they're in parts of the world that aren't really filmable. They're in like the blocking is different, right? There's obstructions in front of the camera.
Yeah.
They're almost out of sight. And I think in the script that I read, she actually like takes her skirt off and gets in the water. She wades in the water and she's like, come skinny dip with me. And he's like, I can't. And she's like, oh yeah, right. I'm so stupid. Obviously you can't. And he's like, huh? because like, how would you know that I don't like water?
Oh, yeah.
And then the same thing happens where the dad shows up to pick her up. But in the script, the guy who comes to pick her up has red hair. And she says to Truman, like, he's going to lie to you. He's not my dad. Look at him. He looks nothing like me. They took that out. It's unneeded.
Yeah, it's unneeded. Yeah. She
It's a
just
great
needs to say that she's never seen him before.
But it's crazy how much she tells him everything. She even
Well,
goes so
that's-
far as to say, it's a show. They're watching you. But then he's
he doesn't-
gaslighted.
But she doesn't, like, I feel like she was trying so hard to, like, let him know. It's like, true, it's nothing's real, blah, blah, blah. But, like, if she really wanted to tell him what was going on, she could have told him. It's exactly like, this is a set. These are actors. This isn't real.
She says all that. She just doesn't say incoherent sentences like,
Yeah.
look, dude, you are inside a dome.
Yeah.
You are the star of a TV
That's
show.
what I'm-
It's
that's
not
what I'm-
succinct. It's
But
really...
I think it would be hard though. Like if you were on a date with someone that's like the most famous person in the whole world, and you're like, I don't really want to like weird them out. I got to wait for the right moment, and
Yeah,
then
I
all of a
guess so.
sudden it's like you don't have a moment. This is it or nothing.
I guess
well, there's
maybe-
another part to her character, which is I think she loves Truman because I
Yeah.
think a lot of people in the world that grow up and they feel like you know him. And Truman takes the words from her because he kisses her.
Yeah.
She tries to tell him something like, I can't talk. And she's like, then don't. And then they kiss.
Right.
And it's when the car is already there to interrupt her that she starts trying to tell him that it's all a charade. So she really doesn't have time.
I mean, maybe you're right that, like, she doesn't, like, it would not be possible to express the fullness of the situation to him in that moment. But, like, it was just so funny to me that, like, everything that she was saying could be easily dismissed as the ramblings of like a conspiracy theorist or like someone who's
or a schizophrenic person,
Yeah.
as her father
Well, that's
says.
why it works, I think, in the movie, because you don't want it to be so clear to Truman that he should immediately go on the run.
Yeah, he has to kind of remember that and keep that with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
What do
movie.
what do you guys think happened after he got out of the dome? Because Sylvia puts on her jacket and runs out the door. Like she's like,
I
I'm gonna
love
go meet
that
him.
the credits just roll when he steps out.
Oh,
Yeah.
Because
perfect.
everything that follows, you can imagine.
You can imagine.
I saw on the internet
Do you think
some people hate the ending. They're like, I want to know what happens. I'm like, no, that's not a good
You
ending.
know what happens.
Yeah.
He goes out. There's studio people who like give him space as he walks out. Then there's a bunch of paparazzi at the door. They're all in his face. Then Sylvia's there. They hug.
Yeah.
They push the paparazzi away. They get in the car, and then he gets reintroduced to life.
Yeah.
It's a great example of restraint
Yeah.
used in filmmaking because everyone wants to find out what happens next.
Yeah, totally.
But the difference between a good ending and a bad ending is when you stop.
They're ending on the high. You're right up here.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could have the denouement of them hugging and being like, Truman, Sylvia.
Screw that.
And then and then he gets out and finds out that his only skills are insurance. So then he just becomes a real insurance broker.
Yeah.
You'd never have to work
Or
again.
you get the Zack Snyder cut of the movie. Truman's head explodes. Sylvia falls down the stairs. Christoph's like, we'll have another one. And then it turns, like the turnstile happens and there's
Oh my
clones
God.
of Truman.
Oh God.
Oh, speaking of Christoph, I did want to ask you guys about whether, like, he's sad when it ends. Christoph is.
Yeah, in the original script, there's like a whole the movie actually ends on Christoph, and it's like everyone's kind of like cheering but kind of weirded out in the upper studio, and he just sits in the chair and
In
he
the
like
moon room.
yeah, in the moon moon room, and he's like, oh,
Yeah.
and that's how the movie kind of
But
ends.
that's so funny to me because it's like they paint him as this like artistic what am I looking for? Savant. Like he's like amazing.
With the
He's
beret.
got the vision. Yeah. And I would think that as a artist, maybe he understands that this is the best ending. Like the best ending isn't the one in which Truman remains a
dies.
captive his entire life and just kind of like lives and dies in the dome.
True, but again, he has these other interests like money and other scope of the show that he wants to do. He
Right.
really, they have that deleted scene, but he does mention he wants to have a baby born on camera. So
Right.
he has these other milestones he hasn't hit
That's
yet.
true.
Yeah.
That's true.
And I think it might be a big picture thing that like 10 years later he would be like, yes, that was the perfect ending. I couldn't have orchestrated it better.
Yeah.
But as it's happening, it's like everything's falling apart. It's all over. This is
Yeah.
so terrifying.
Yeah, okay. I track with that a little bit.
I have a question for you guys. Is this a matrix you would want to plug into if you could have your mind erased and go live as Truman?
No way.
What?
No way, dude.
The town's so boring.
Nasty. It's lame. Like
Also, the town is too small for the things it has. Like
Yeah.
they make reference to like Sea Haven Tonight, like a Tonight Show
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Dude, the Sea Haven looks like
Yeah.
it's like 4,000 people.
Oh, if even.
they have like
yeah.
a college. And
They have like a
everything. Yeah.
high-rise building with business executives and stuff. It's like,
Right,
what?
right.
It's a tiny town.
It's just like a little microcosm of an American city. Yeah, Christoph says Sea Haven is America as it should be.
Yeah.
It's like, pfft, buddy.
I think it's an interesting kind of mild exploration of that theme where it's like the kind of 50s America is like idyllic America, and people are like, yeah, it's what we want to go back to. Like I think that's what Make America Great is about. Is like we want to go back to 50s America where everyone's prosperous, there's no crime, there's no this.
And like, just look at the road outside of his house. It's not even concrete. It's like it's a cobblestone.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, man.
Right,
It looks like a pedestrian downtown.
But it's not
like
real.
a car-free area.
But it's not real, and it never
See,
can
this
be
is
real.
so funny because like I feel like from the get go, Sea Haven isn't like I wasn't like, ooh, that sounds like a great time. It looked just boring as hell. Like I don't know.
I think though, like I mean, yes, it's not a real town, so if you're not Truman, I'm sure it's garbage. But I think they probably made sure that he had enough activities to do that it would be interesting.
It fits in the budget. They obviously can't have like an urban, a lively, like a Chinatown, and there's like really good noodles over there, and like it's small, right?
Well, the original script was set in New York. It was like a parallel universe New York, and it was like they would have had more of that, but
there's too many variables.
Oh, there's actually a line from the script I read that wasn't in this movie, and it's because when Sylvia's dad takes her away, rushes her off, and he says, Fiji, we're moving to Fiji. And he just ad-libs that because they're just reacting. Right?
Yeah.
And then it cuts to the creator. What's the creator's name? Christoph. Cuts to Christoph being like, oh, and this is actually in the explanation of what happened, like in the montage part. Christoph's like, good thing he didn't say New York. Like he said something far away that's like, thank God.
Yeah, that if they ever had to recreate Fiji.
And there's actually, they did recreate, in the script, they do recreate Fiji. In the part where he's running away and then he's intercepted by like the nuclear plant thing.
Yeah.
In the screenplay, you can hear the noise of construction, and then it cuts to behind this like artificial wall of foliage that they had intercepted him in front of. Behind that, there's a new set being created, and there's all these Polynesian people with like learning how to present lei necklaces, and there's a artificial volcano going off, and they've constructed a plane and like a gate and a runway and stuff. Like they were going to react to how to handle his desire.
Now that I think about it, it'd be pretty easy for them to like simulate the whole getting in a plane, taking off, flying somewhere else.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. Oh,
it'd be like a Disney ride.
I think it's just a reality of filmmaking that creating those props for the one shot of Fiji is too expensive.
That's exactly it. And one more removed line that I thought was really drove it home for me, but never made it in the movie was when they're talking about Sylvia, the line, you know how they go to those like waitresses and they're talking about like, those two never had a chance, and they talk about like relationship aspects.
I love those characters.
There was a line that was like, Sylvia was willing to give up everything so that Truman could find himself. And I thought, that's awesome. And that's why he likes her so much, really. And the down at the root of it, yes, she's like beautiful and she represents more chaos and going with
answers,
and instinct and intuition.
She might actually be insane.
But she also was the only one. She was the only one in the world who was like willing to lose everything so that he could be the best version, or realist version of himself.
Yeah.
And I think he kind of can sense that.
Totally.
Yeah,
well, yeah, for sure. She represents freedom and answers, and he's lived a whole life contained, and she's freedom.
Absolutely.
I wonder what a cardigan smells like.
I wish. I want to see the Zack Snyder cut of this movie where like she's like in front of the TV and it pans around and there's like a hair doll of Truman and she's just like goes and like pets it.
Yes, yeah.
That's more like a Eli Roth version.
And the whole movie's been in her mind.
Yeah. There is no Truman. She's the Truman Show, but there is no other TV.
She's in the Matrix.
Yeah.
And there is a Truman Show in the Matrix.
Okay. Do you have any more important things?
I have a broad question, but it's not about really the movie.
Go for it.
Okay.
Why does the ADR suck so bad?
Well, it's just the 90s. I've been struggling with this quite a bit, that people in our generation, I think, are okay with losing privacy. And it's not like...
Oh, this is real.
Something that we are talking about. Like I was talking with a dude on the weekend and he's like, police should be able to bust into any house they want if they have any suspicion of child porn or like child trafficking.
Right.
And I'm like, yes and no. And like yes, if they have suspicions, they have warrants, fuck it, go get them.
Yeah.
Go get them right now. But like, no, police shouldn't have like a unilateral right to just go anywhere they want.
People with that opinion have just grown up in such a safe world, and they just don't remember the sins of their ancestors. We're like, no, we've been through this, and we know that what happens is the scope creeps where, who decides what warrants you being able to run into someone's house without having like jurisprudence. Like, oh, this crime, I have free reign, carte blanche to just bust into your house. Oh, now this crime, and now this crime. The same logic applies to like hate speech laws and stuff like that.
Well, do you think there's like a parallel to how we're trading privacy for fame? That we're using our privacy as a currency for social media notoriety. And do you think like I find this movie is very prophetic in that sense that like people will be like reality TV stars and social media stars, and like their life will be on display for everyone to see, and that's the appeal of it. But do you think that there's like what do you think that means?
The Truman Show is an allegory for social media before social media even existed.
Well, it does speak to the other side of that coin. Instead of the supply side, the demand side. Why is it that we are so fascinated with the mundane inner workings of someone's private life? Why is it that I want to see this guy brushing his teeth?
Yeah.
Why do I want to see a vlog of someone just like picking up their dog shit?
Yeah, making a smoothie.
I want to. Why?
Well, see, that's the interesting thing about this movie is that I feel like watching some of the people watching Truman, I was like, they would get bored at some point. Like you'd tune back out and tune back in, I guess. You'd like tune in and be like, oh, what's Truman up to now?
Well, like on the early days when he was just a baby, they would have like the sleeping cam, and you could actually buy a sideways TV crib so that you would be able to, instead of like looking at Truman sleeping, you'd be able to like look into this crib with a screen and see him sleeping.
That's messed up.
And
I was wondering about those early days. It would have been such a less engaging show. So it must have just been back then. It was only on like at prime time for an hour or something.
No, it was nonstop, but it was a much cheaper show to produce, and it was a lot less popular. It became popular with its first steps, but it was originally just the ultrasound of the belly. And then it was one room, and then they had to build a kitchen, and then they had to build a house. And then that's when they had to go find investors to build this dome. And they had planned to meet like hundreds of people to get chunks of investments, but the first person they met gave them all the money they needed.
Oh, wow.
And was like, we're so on board with this.
Wow. See,
where is this document? This is so cool.
It's in the script. It's like there's two parts. There's the intro by the director, and then there's like 24 pages by the script writer in the middle. And
because David actually has a physical published copy of this script with cover art and everything.
You do?
Yeah, it's bound. He just forgot it at home today.
Yeah, I was
what the heck?
I love this movie. I got it for like $3 on the internet. I was
wow.
Yeah, okay, sure. I think I dropped it in a tub though, because it was all like warped from the water.
Geez.
I was sad.
See, the parallel to social media that I think we were just talking about. I think the thing that's so attractive to social media isn't necessarily the fact that like we're getting a glimpse into someone else's life. It's the fact that we're getting a glimpse into literally everyone's life. When you scroll through Instagram, you are getting like quick, intimate glimpses of so many different people. And it's just so easy to keep scrolling, right?
Yeah.
It's like and I think the danger there, obviously, the danger in the Truman Show is that he doesn't have any freedom, right? Everything's constructed. Everyone's getting a glimpse into his life, but that's a fake life, and that's the thing that's horrific about that is the fact that he's not living a real life. But I think the thing that's horrific about social media is that we have cheapened life to the point where someone taking a photo of a family gathering or like a trip or some real event that's going on in their life, they take a photo of that and that means a lot to them. But we see it and scroll past it on Instagram. We're like, oh, pretty cool. Let's keep scrolling.
Yeah, there's the social media arms race where it's like everything is hyper real. You're seeing. I'm not sharing with you my real life. I'm showing you my curated projection of my life. Look at my nice apartment when it's spick and span.
There's that element too where influencers spend hours and hours and hours setting up the perfect shot. I think I read an article one time about some influencer who like went on a trip to maybe it was Fiji and they're like staying in a nice hotel and stuff, and they said they posted a photo and they were like, it took me like 3 hours to set up this shot. And it's just them like standing in front of a window looking out or whatever. But like, everything's perfectly placed. Like there's things in the corner, product placement on the shelf there. And it took them 3 hours to make the shot. And to someone else, it just looks like, oh, look, I'm having this really cool time on vacation. But really they're like spending hours and hours and hours making things look perfect.
The horrific thing about that is how it ups the standard.
Yeah.
So now it's so weird to me that like how even children now know how to pose for photos. And like every 10-year-old girl you see, it's like, oh, she's gonna stand with her her chest kind of off angle to the camera. She's going to turn her arm and hide it behind her so she looks skinnier. She's probably going to arch her back and bend her knees a little bit. It's like, why does an 8-year-old know how to do that? It's disgusting, man.
Oh man, we're having a boomer moment here now.
Dude,
though.
It's bad.
My big question is, do we do it because it makes us feel inspired by them, or does it make us feel better about ourselves? Or because like reality shows, we're seeing the worst of
We're trying to keep up with the Joneses, right? And you want to be the Joneses. So you're trying to take a picture that you think represents you in the best way,
Yep.
but then everyone else is like, damn, now I need to do that and be as good and get the clout and get the reaction from other people that I'm living my life properly.
No, absolutely. You see these people having so much fun. They're having so much fun in their lives, and you want to be part of that. You don't want to be missing out.
Well, they nailed that in the Truman Show, where it's like people just want to be part of Truman's life.
Yeah, the guy's like helicopter, or not helicopter.
Parachuting.
Parachuting into the...
The guy comes out of the gift and he's like, I'm on the Truman Show.
Yeah, I'm on the Truman Show.
That was so perfect. That's
So
exactly
funny.
how it would be.
Yeah. Highly recommend this movie. Watch it again with all the trivia that I've given you.
Yeah.
The little tidbits of.
So there's a couple things that I want to bring up because it's like they were like nitpicks. We got to do nitpicks.
Yeah, let's do it.
We've praised this movie enough. When they're trying to find him when he falls asleep in the basement or whatever, and they can't track him on the camera.
Oh, they do an enhance.
They do an enhance.
Enhance.
He's like, wait, quick, over there. Zoom in. Enhance it. I wrote down, enhance it.
But the crazy thing is that we're there. Like we have AI upscaling, we have AI cleaning, so where you can take like a really shitty image and actually get the detail back. So
Yeah,
like
that's funny.
We're there, and
I
like
think
that's
that
a
it was
real
like,
thing.
That was so like futuristic, and everyone's
Totally.
like, you can't just enhance.
Yeah.
But it's like now with AI, it's like you almost
Your
can.
NVIDIA Shield can.
All
like,
these things are. You're.
Hit me up with your next nitpick.
Oh, where is it? Oh, actors. They're like, well, are they going to hire actors to be a bus driver who can't drive a bus? Like, I feel like that's a requirement. Even when you hire somebody to drive a bus in a movie,
Well, okay,
you make
the
sure they can
driver-
drive a bus.
Okay, that actor, he couldn't drive the boat. He said, I can't drive. The bottom line is they can't drive the boat. They're actors.
You think that
but
he
when
purposefully-
he's on the bus and he's grinding the gears and it causes that bus breakdown?
Yeah.
In the movie, that played to me like, oh, he knows how to drive the bus. He's intentionally grinding the gears so
Yeah.
that they can't leave.
Same.
However, in the screenplay, it actually is out of ineptitude.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, honestly, because I thought that too when I watched the movie. I was like, oh, maybe he's doing that on
It
purpose.
reads better, the
But
movie,
I
for me.
What?
It plays better the way they did it in the movie.
Where it's ineptitude.
No, where it's like, oh, he's
doing it on
causing this
purpose.
thing. Yeah, another thing that I thought was great in the movie is when that light drops down, and this is, again, is better in the movie than the screenplay that I read. When the light drops down at the beginning, he's like looking at it, and he's like, that's weird. He gets into his car, and then the radio announcer on the car talks about how this is an event, like a plane went over and it dropped from it. And then he spins it. So he's like, huh, you guys want to fly right now? I bet not. That's crazy. Who wants to be
Yeah.
in a plane that's like dropping parts? And they use that random event that
Yeah.
could actually trigger his curiosity about the world and his skepticism about the world. They use it to double down on why he should not leave
Right,
Totally.
and not escape the world. And that was so clever and insidious.
That doesn't make sense. Wait, but the bus driver thing, real quick. I think that it makes sense that he was actually inept because later they double up on the joke. They're like, okay, we got to get boats. The only way to go get him is to go out on boats. Like, oh no, they don't know how to drive the boats. They're just actors. And I think that indicates that he.
You're right, Ashley, because he again is at a set of levers going.
Yeah,
"Blah,
it's
blah."
the same thing.
Yeah,
But also at the same time, I'm like, there's somebody there who knows how to drive a boat.
I don't know, man.
Like actors aren't just like clones that come off a
but
production line.
They're
with-
not planning to have the boat move that day. And
I was offended as an actor.
can you drive a ferry?
I can drive a regular boat.
It's probably a bit more
Look,
complicated.
there's levers. You just push it forward.
I don't know, man.
Release the
I
e-brake.
can't even tie the knots.
Okay, give us a second. We're gonna go rent a boat. Riley's gonna try driving it.
Give me your
Rent a
next
ferry.
nitpick.
I don't know if I have many more. I thought you guys would have some
The movie's
nitpicks.
perfect. I already did mine. Where I wish more people loved Truman on the inside.
Oh, the actors double as organizers. When they're like, oh, we need to find him. And then they're like, the Marlon and even the twins, the old twin guys, they're like organizing people and ordering them around and stuff.
And the neighbor's dog is evil.
Yeah,
The Dalmatian
yeah.
Love it.
And the
snarling.
guy's like, get him, Pluto. I'm like, wait, so this is your real dog? Like,
He's a trained dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was so that broke the illusion.
I think
bit
though
for me.
it'd be
I liked it.
it'd be a wasted amount of time to have to set up like manager characters, and
Oh, I
it's
don't-
a lot easier to just have the actors be the person, and then they have hundreds of extras on the show. That's the easiest like large group of people to just search.
Yeah, and I guess we saw that a bit in the deleted scene where the main actors are kind of like part of the
That's just like Hollywood,
creative
dude.
group.
That's exactly what happens in Hollywood. You get a movie, you got a screenplay going, and you're like, oh, we're gonna get George Clooney or Brad Pitt on board on this movie, and then it's like, well, that person has so much power that they become kind of like a producer, and they can
That's
start
true.
calling the shots.
I
and they
guess
can-
so.
They
I
can,
could see
they
Tom
have more
Cruise.
power than the screenwriter a lot of the time.
Yeah, Jordan, and I guess if we're saying that the actors who are in Truman's close circle are sort of at the same level as like a George Clooney or a Tom Cruise,
They're way up there.
that kind of makes sense, I guess.
Yeah.
So next week, Mulan.
Are we doing it?
Yeah, I guess
wanted
so.
to do
We're
it.
gonna try.
And we'll make a man out of you. That should have been the end line. I shouldn't have.
Let's get down to business.
To defeat
The bad review.
the.
I don't know what's happening.
James has no idea what that.
I've never seen the original Mulan, so
Wow.
and I'm not going to.
He's gonna be the blind person.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the control group here. So that's it. If you want to tweet at us with your response to our mass stuff or this movie, or to recommend the next movie we should cover, then we are available on Twitter at Carpool Critics, and also available via email, you boomers out there. carpoolcriticspodcast@gmail.com. That's right, it's a Gmail.
Yeah. Wait. People don't want it to be a Gmail?
Well, it's more professional if it's at
Use
Carpool Critics.
Hotmail.
No, your own custom domain.
Because it's hot.
Let me tell you, Outlook, baby. All right, see you
See you
later.
later.
That is a Jim Carrey line, by the way.
What? That's hot?
No, see you later. It's a Dumb and Dumber
No,
quote.
no. See, I heard you say this, but when I said it as my catchphrase, I didn't know about that. All right, I forgot about it.
No, you got it as a catchphrase from me quoting Dumb and Dumber.
That's incorrect.
All right, buddy.
There's no way. Wait, what? Are you being serious right now?
We're going away now.
You think that I said, well, see you later because you said see you later?
Because Jim Carrey comes out of a 7-Eleven in Dumb and Dumber, and he sees these black guys standing there, and he doesn't know how to relate to them, and he's like, "Hey, big gulps, huh?" Because they're
Yeah, and he
drinking
says,
big
"Well,
gulps."
see you
And
later.
he stands there awkwardly, and he goes, "Well, see you later."
This is more of an example of convergent
You know,
evolution
you didn't-
rather than.
No, you're not like Leibniz or whatever inventing calculus the same time as Newton.
No, that's exactly what's
No,
happening.
it's not. You
I'm
say
a
it-
genius.
You say it with the exact same intonation as he
End the
does.
podcast.